Welcome to Layer 3 of the Protocol Multiverse. If you've been following our previous investigations, you know we've looked closely at the human experience of time and the underlying systems that shape our world. Today, we're bringing those pieces together. We're going to look at the exact process that became you.
I want you to think about a rather cold contradiction. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet, right? It literally doesn't exist. And yet you probably already know exactly what time you're going to wake up. You know where you'll go, what's waiting for you, and maybe most importantly, you know exactly which version of yourself the day is going to require. It's strange. Nothing has actually happened yet, but your future has already arrived in a very familiar shape. Part 1. The already familiar future. If you were to look at a calendar page for next month, at first glance, it just looks visually blank. But look a little closer and you'll see invisible structures starting to fill it up. It's structurally occupied, with work, travel, deadlines, payments, and expected roles. The future is inherently unknown, but you experience it as already familiar. Now, people love to call this predicting their future, but really, it's just recognition. You're simply recognizing a schedule and a set of expectations that have already been decided for you by the systems you live inside. Part 2. The infrastructure of ordinary life.
So to understand how this actually happens, we have to look at the infrastructure all around us. Stable systems survive by doing one thing really well: preserving successful patterns. They eliminate unnecessary uncertainty. They take newly discovered paths and quietly convert them into standard procedures and expectations. Essentially, they transform the unpredictable into the completely predictable. And look, we shouldn't view this as a failure. It's actually a massive civilizational achievement. Because roads are paved in concrete, because languages are stabilized in dictionaries, and because your smartphone runs on standardized code, you get real safety, you get stability, you are granted the freedom from having to repeatedly solve those exact same problems every single day. The system has essentially done all the exploring for you.
Part 3. Expectation becomes assumption. But here is the catch. Every powerful system comes with a trade-off. As your environment absorbs more and more uncertainty just to keep you safe, you, the individual, encounter significantly less of it in your day-to-day life. The unknown doesn't just vanish from reality, it has just moved much further away from your ordinary experience. And this is where a subtle psychological shift starts to take place. First, your environment just becomes easier to navigate. Second, that navigation slowly replaces exploration as your default relationship with the future. And third, because tomorrow almost always arrives through those familiar structures, you start treating that familiar routine as absolute evidence of what's actually possible. Next week already has a shape. Next year already has its responsibilities. Which brings us to the primary question of this entire investigation. What happens to your sense of possibility when the very systems protecting your life from uncertainty also teach you to expect the future to perfectly resemble the present? What happens when a predictable environment becomes the model you use to predict yourself?
Part 4. Predicting the self. Now, this is the core realization of our debrief today, and it is absolutely crucial to understanding how you operate. At a certain point, you no longer just predict your environment, you actually begin predicting yourself through it. You slowly begin to confuse two wildly different things: a predictable environment and a predictable future. You start assuming that your future identity will only be legible through your current role, your routines, and your currently available options. Just think about what happens when you map out a 5-year plan for your career and then suddenly realize it's just an exact replica of your current boss's life. The system's boundaries have, very quietly, become the boundaries of your own felt possibility. When this happens, your current responsibilities and limitations slowly stop feeling like just a present condition. They actually start functioning as a permanent forecast. You never sit down and explicitly decide, well, this is all I will ever be. No, the conclusion arrives much more quietly than that. It just whispers, this is probably what comes next.
Part 5. Outside the map.
Now, we need to be clear about something here. Reality hasn't actually become fully predictable. Life hasn't stopped changing. Profound, world-shifting transformations still emerge every single day. The universe remains entirely unpredictable. It's just that the systems surrounding your ordinary life have pushed all that uncertainty much farther away from your daily experience. The edge of the unknown is absolutely still out there. It has simply been relocated beyond the boundaries of the systems that have already learned how to protect you from it. So possibility remains conceptually real, right? But it becomes emotionally remote. The unknown starts to feel like it belongs somewhere else.
somewhere way off the established path, like it belongs to another country or another profession or just another kind of person. It turns into a future that is just too distant to feel psychologically real to you anymore.
Part 6. What feels available?
And that leads us to our final integration, looking at exactly how possibility becomes psychologically unavailable. See, the future never stopped containing possibilities. You simply stopped expecting those possibilities to show up inside your ordinary life. You didn't lose your agency, you didn't lose your imagination, and you certainly didn't become incapable of change. But your imagination became increasingly organized only by what your existing environment can make visible, available, and reasonable. Your future self became much easier to predict, simply because only the familiar versions of that self kept getting any psychological credibility.
So let's tie this all together. This is exactly how the layers of our investigation connect. In the Punchline Protocol, we saw the human experience of time shrinking, that loss of first times. Then, the Dark Side Protocol laid out the system's architecture, how uncertainty is converted into predictable infrastructure. And now, here in the Debrief Protocol, we get the integration, the resulting internal map of the self. The external map of the system literally became your internal map of possibility. Nothing fundamentally new was learned here today, but hopefully everything is now understood differently.
Because the reality is this: you didn't stop having a future. The world definitely didn't run out of uncertainty. The part of the future that felt personally available to you just relocated to the very edge of the map. You thought tomorrow had become predictable, but what had actually become predictable was just the path through which you were being taught to imagine it. The present just got so incredibly effective at explaining tomorrow that the unexplained future began to feel much less real than the prepared one. You stopped expecting your future to contain a version of you that your present life could not already explain. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. If the future you imagine for yourself is really just a reflection of the system you are currently standing inside, what would it actually take to step off the map and imagine something else? The ideas are human. The narration is digital. Interpretation remains yours.